Thank you. Good morning. And thank you very much to Thomas and all the organisers. It's been a fantastic couple of days for me already. And here I am, out of my comfort zone to start with, slightly further out of the comfort zone, thanks to the technology, but hopefully we'll recover now. As Louise was just saying, for a political philosopher to be thinking about impact is to be doing something that you never expected you'd really be doing. And yet, I think the point of any philosopher doing political philosophy is to connect with how things are organised in the world. So, in a sense, it's pushing us to do what we perhaps should have been doing already. But exactly how we go about it is the question. Thomas has been an inspiration to myself and many others I know around the world in thinking how you can apply political philosophy beyond academia, and showing in particular how you can reframe debates, even push things forward a little bit in the policy arena. But not all of us have Thomas's ideas or Thomas's capacity to actually influence at that top level. So we have to think about other things that we could perhaps be doing which don't involve some of those quite exceptional things that Thomas has been able to do. How is it that we can get some traction, at least, for our ideas, for our thinking, to connect up with what's happening in the world? And, okay. Oops. So it always makes sense, I think, to start where you are. So I'm starting where I am, which is at the University of Edinburgh. There's a number of reasons to reflect on where you are, because where I am in part in the academic world and where I am in the world globally are very relevant to the kind of impact that I and my colleagues can make. We are here to talk about primarily what we can do about poverty, and the first thing we need to reflect on is the fact that we, without exception, are all affluent in the global situation. So that already is an influencing factor in anything that we're going to be doing. Now I'm nervous because I'm overtly being recorded. It might be used against me. On the board here, I've indicated University of Edinburgh. As any institution does, it likes to say where it is in the world, and we're on this league. We're sort of on the same page as Yale. This particular rankings, we're number 17, Yale's number 8. That's to show that the university is fulfilling an aspiration to be a global leader, and that has a significance which I'll come back to when thinking about what we, as mere political philosophers within a very large institution, can do. And I'd also emphasise that I'm in the city of Edinburgh, the city of David Hume, and his namesake almost yesterday captured something, one of the things that I want to capture about our own David Hume. This is here for the benefit of the philosophers in particular, because one of the things Hume is renowned for is for waking the great Immanuel Kant from his dogmatic slumbers. Hume was what I would call perhaps for play on words slightly, but a humane skeptic. He was very skeptical about the claims of knowledge and skeptical about human beings. But that didn't stop him finding human beings, on the whole, people that you could do business with and be convivial with. And these are aspects of being at the University of Edinburgh, and I think also of aspects of just being involved in the world, which it's good to have some resonance with. And the connection with Kant is also one which is there to be played with anyone that's interested in doing that kind of thing. So our university is there projecting to the world, and in particular, in recent years, it's developed this particular strategy for projecting our teaching, research, and engagement with the world through the global academies it's set up. There's 4 global academies, one for development, one for environment and society, one for global health, and one for justice. These academies are there for everyone at the university to participate in the various activities of. They're there as a way of saying to the world, we're here and we want to engage, and saying to the world, we're here and we want you to come to us. So clearly, there's 2 essential things going on here. There's the intrinsic activities that we're doing, which we really hope to project to the world, and there's also the business of getting people from the world to take notice and come to Edinburgh so that it gets even higher up that list and closer to places like Yale, to put it frankly. So, projecting to the world in this way, the idea of these academies is that they harness capacity from across the entire university. Our university, like any large university, has a great deal going on. There's a lot of work going on that's relevant to the science of climate change, that's relevant to the alleviation of poverty, that's relevant to helping with global health problems around the world. We, as political philosophers, are a small part, but we've got a significant part to play in that university, and that's what I'm here really to talk about today. One aspect of this is that a couple of us from the Institute are on the steering group of the Global Justice Academy, but our activities and our interests as ethicists and philosophers extend across the range of the university's global engagement. Justice applies to the various aspects of health, it applies to poverty, development, and it applies also to environmental questions. One thing that the university itself is currently concerned about, which is emblematic of a more general point that I want to make, is that it's responsive to pressures, it's responsive to threats to reputation, it's responsive just to plain concerns of ethics that students and other staff and the public present it with. And Edinburgh is the first university in Europe to sign up to the UN's responsible investment principles, and having done so, the university finds that the students are pouncing on it now to say, well, you've signed up for these things, and what does this mean? Just a couple of weeks ago, the university withdrew its investment from a company manufacturing parts for drones, but now it's having to figure out what else it's committed to in terms of disinvesting. And the question about investments in fossil fuel companies is the next thing on the horizon. So there's things there which I and other colleagues involved in political philosophy and ethics in particular are engaged with the administration of the university in talking about how one deals with ethical behaviour on the part of the institution as a corporate actor in the world, getting beyond the sort of business frame of reference of corporate social responsibility, which is sometimes a kind of tick box exercise, to actually thinking what substantively do ethical principles mean when you proclaim yourself as an institution with high ethical standards. Another commitment of this university is to principles of fair trade. Initially, it got the accreditation of the Fair Trade, one-word organisation, and we have since developed to the point where we have a full-time coordinator of fair trade at the university, and we debate a little bit more about how we have to understand fair trade in a much more comprehensive sense than just in the terms of a certification scheme. And as I say, the university is committed to high ethical standards. This is expressly in its strategic plan. And those of us that have taken an interest in these kinds of things over the years are very glad to see that it's continued to move in this direction. It's been very responsive, I have to say, in having consultations and so on when it's prepared these plans. So all of that is, in a sense, it could sound like boasting to some extent about the university, but it's actually just to take an assessment of what people in my position in this kind of university can do, because that's where you start from. If we go out as political philosophers into the world, we write our books and publish our articles, how many people read them? Not a great number. But if we can harness an institution the size of the University of Edinburgh and many other institutions around the world, you can amplify your message quite considerably. And what I've done there is just to sort of indicate the Just World Institute is a group of people at its core. We're political philosophers and ethicists, but there are other people engaged in teaching of ethics around the university with some overlap with us, but there's others that do bioethics, which are not in the same field of social ethics that we do. And then, of course, there's the wider university, all of the other constituencies that we can link up with in partnerships as is appropriate. Then outside the university is the rest of the world. So the idea really is within the Just World Institute to mobilize the ethics community more widely that are spread across a number of departments in the university, to influence the other people in the university who are working on development, who are working on global health, working on environment, and then together project out into the world. That is the sort of broad strategy. In early days yet, to be fair. And I've referred to this as enlightening the institutional or corporate interest in addressing global challenges. There's an instrumental interest in addressing all of these things, but there's also an ethical interest. And what we're playing on is harnessing the kind of ethical considerations that we as philosophers bring to the institutional interests that the university has in developing its research and teaching in these areas. And I'm very pleased to say that the university does take this holistic view of what the global challenges are. And you'll notice actually on this, which is actually taken from our chief government scientist's assessment of what the problems are, and climate change is in the middle of this. And you'll notice that resource issues, environmental issues are very much to the fore. And this isn't simply because we do research in that, it's because actually there is an understanding that the challenges that we face now, and even more so into the future, have to do with addressing the environmental dimension. And one of the things that's very central to the activities of the Just World Institute is to see these challenges as interrelated, and not to see the environment questions as somehow separate from poverty questions. I think to do so is a big mistake for a number of reasons. I mean, one obvious reason that's been highlighted by several people in this weekend is that poverty is often, the very meaning of poverty is ecological marginalization. It's actually been deprived of an immediate environment and resources, resource capture as well. And so the medium of poverty is the environment. And also we know that environmental change, its impacts, always hit hardest and first at the poorest, because, to put it bluntly, the richer people can avoid and evade them in various ways. So I kind of emphasize that as something which is a little bit distinctive perhaps compared to some other institutes that we bring, which is this emphasis on seeing the environment not as something separate, but something actually integral to problems connected with poverty and other aspects of global justice. So the other dimension, which I'm not really emphasizing so much today, is the conflict and peace. Along the bottom, there are three kind of themes that we link up the ethics towards. They're the environment, on the one side, poverty and wealth, and then conflict and peace, which is also inextricably bound up with the other two dimensions in our understanding. So our research is really intended to understand the linkages between these problems. So thinking about impact specifically, as I say, somewhat out of our comfort zone, but making some steps, there are certain I've identified certain channels or certain directions that we can push this through. One is by working on the university as a corporate actor. It's a big institution and it's attempting to grow globally, opening offices in the various BRICS countries, really engaging with the world. So anything that we can influence the university to do is going to have some impact already. So we are engaged there with advising on principles of responsibility and sustainability, not just by issuing reports, but actually engaging with the process that the university itself is going through when it thinks, how do we respond to public pressures about our investment policy, for example. And we happen to have a director of procurement with a very large budget who is passionately concerned with fair trade. So we're very fortunate in that respect to have someone there who's more than receptive, who's actually proactive in thinking with us about the ethics of engaging in fair trade. And so we convene the Fair Trade Academic Network as well. And this clearly is very important, because once you start engaging the fair trade research, not simply ticking the boxes that the certification schemes have provided, but actually going out and looking at the supply chains from the producers right through to the consumers, and you engage the research in doing that, you start finding out a lot of stuff that you wouldn't know if you simply go down and buy your fair trade coffee in the shop. And there's so much there to learn. And then the questions about how these fair trade specific chains link into the broader global economy, and to what extent you have to engage with those broader political economic forces, are very much linking the theory and the practice with regard to that question. And yeah, the fact that we host the Ethics Forum, which is basically a place where you have meetings and then online discussion of current ethical issues to do with public and international affairs, that is a benefit for the university in various ways, because the university itself, as an actor, has to think through some of these things, as I've suggested. So then there's the public understanding of global ethical issues by just having meetings with the public in Edinburgh, the public more widely through the various social media outlets that we're developing. We're all sort of learning to blog and tweet, to as if our lives depended on it now, and this is all very exciting and new for us. Perhaps for some of you it's a bit of an older thing to be doing. But it is opening up whole new channels of communication and learning by engaging in the social media. And of course there's the fair trade events that we do and various round tables. So fairly standard kinds of activities, but we are a hub, if you like, or a focus for doing those with specific reference to these questions that are connected with global poverty, global environmental change, and global peace. Something which we're starting to build more, we haven't done so much in the past, we've done a bit of it in the past. It does require people who are not philosophers or a very special kind of philosopher to be doing this, but by harnessing people who do have these skills to engage with the practitioners from the various sectors. Like being in Edinburgh, we're very convenient for the Scottish government, and we happen to be in the Department of Politics. Most of the people are at the centre of the Just World Institute, so we also have connections with the UK government as well. So we can have various connections there to develop, plus the NGOs and business representatives. And some of my colleagues in the Just World Institute are also working on, they're doing studies of philanthropy, hopefully, in order to learn how to appeal to philanthropists to give us some longer-term support. Because we don't at the moment have independent funding, which is another reason we're looking to the university all the time to show what we can do for it, because we have our jobs there, and that's how we're able to keep going. But it'd be nice also to be able to attract independent funding to support some of the extra scholarly activities that we're trying to build. And of course, massively important are the students. They're important, obviously, because we teach the students. Only this morning I was looking on Twitter. A student of mine from back in the 90s, he's now there writing these reports. He's actually contributed to this latest one about the post-2015 goals, and I'm pleased to say, is there saying you really have to take a notice of the environmental dimension, really see this as integral to those. And his name's Alex Evans, and I'm very pleased to be able to point to students like that who are out there in the world doing this kind of thing. But also the students are bringing to the university the questions about why are you investing in fossil fuels, is the one they're currently posing. And we learn a lot from them because they're our antennae in many ways, because those of us who are engaged in research projects over a number of years are not always alert to the latest thing on the horizon that's coming, but you can be sure that the students as a group are. And their group, People and Planet in particular, keep us on our toes in that respect. So we're expanding our teaching in this area. The university already has a good deal of teaching, but we're developing it further with specific reference to ethics, which we're trying to spread across the university so that you can study ethics in conjunction with all subjects, and not simply as a kind of professional add-on, but as something reflecting on the ethics of the issues that they would study within their disciplines. And specifically with regard to the fair trade business, we've set up a fair trade dissertation prize. So that's encouraging students to think about writing dissertations on this topic and to encourage supervisors to suggest it in order to contribute to this aim that the university has, I don't like the word, but embedding sustainability or embedding ethics in the curriculum. I don't really think it's things should be embedded like that from above, but I think if we can encourage people to be reflecting on things which are intrinsically important, then we're doing something that's worth doing. And as I've said before, the university has these global academies. We're on the steering group of one of them, but we're also engaged with the others as well. And the Global Development Academy does a great deal of work of the kinds that we are here this weekend talking about. They tend not to be the philosophers, they tend to be the people that are out there looking at what's going to work, what might actually help. So there's obviously a lot of synergies there. And similarly with the people that work on environment and the people that work on access to health and medicine in various parts of the world. And of course our input into the Global Justice Academy is more direct because we work on the understandings of global justice, the philosophy of it, we work on the ethical dimensions of it, and we work with the lawyers in particular on understanding the normativity of this and the various aspects of thinking about global governance, law and politics have these interconnections. And of course, we work with our own colleagues, the Climate Change Network, the Fair Trade Network, global constitutionalism, as I've just been suggesting, is a topic which is very relevant, because this weekend we've heard so much about how governance is at the heart of really trying to push things forward, to actually think then what kind of governance globally we should be perhaps aiming to institute, and collaborating across a range of substantive issues. So I don't have too much longer now. We do a certain amount of scholarly networking, but I'm here in part because I'd like to do more, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from the other directors of institutes and having our conversations today about how we can link up with you more. Already yesterday, the idea of, I was quite inspired by the idea of thinking about the social norms globally. And I was thinking there's quite a role for people who work on conceptualizing justice as well as trying to implement it, in thinking about what new social norms there will be globally. What the unacceptability of poverty, well, to my mind, it necessarily entails thinking about the unacceptability of affluence as long as there is poverty. I personally find it a struggle to keep listening to this thing from the World Bank about you can have win-win situations. To me, this expresses a faith that you can do something that you've not done up to now. For me, this is a faith pretty much on a par with the faith in creation that humans were created like 10,000 years ago or something. Until it's shown how you can have these win-win situations, I think you have to assume that for the poor to really get lifted from poverty in a world where we're using more than our resources already, the rich actually have to be learning how to live within their means. And that also is a profound ethical challenge, which I think we have to help one another with, to establish global norms where actually living within your means is one that you take as a positive inspiration for a better way of living, rather than something you try and hide under the carpet because it means making sacrifices that people don't want. So I think if you're going to have to put a positive spin on anything, it's about how you can live simple in means but rich in ends, to use an old phrase. How am I doing for time? I think I've 2 minutes, right, I think I'm pretty much there now. So our distinctive contribution, possibly not the only one, because not everyone at Edinburgh is obsessed by linking in the environment, but I still would flag this, is that we should be looking at these 2015 development goals in connection with the 2015 climate summit. Ethical goals also have to be aligned with what works, so those of us who are philosophers do have to pay a lot of attention to what we hear from people that are out in the field doing more empirical research, and practical ethics does have to be based on robust explanatory theory. Political philosophers often start in the middle of a debate whose premises, whose assumptions about the world have been established by someone else. And for much of the debate at the moment, that would be John Rawls, who took a great deal of care in being explicit about what his assumptions are and what his theory should apply to. I think we need to get back to that, to review those basic assumptions. We don't live now in discrete nation states with stable liberal democratic institutions. We need to think from the ground up globally about the political and economic context that we live in. And I think this is a big challenge as well for political philosophers, and to get that message out. In all of this, a moral touchstone for me, thinking about human rights, thinking about all of this, is Henry Shu's idea of a morality of the depths. If human rights are for anything, they protect those interests which really correspond to the morality of the depths. And I would take that as a moral touchstone, but not being much more morally ambitious than that, as we envision the goals. And I've quoted Mary Robinson here because she is somebody that's well known for campaigning for human rights, but she has now said climate change is and climate justice is the biggest challenge for human rights today. And I am with her on that, and it's good now that people are saying this, and that's a kind of substantive point that I'd make. And perhaps the one that I'd close on is when we're thinking back now, not simply from the point of view of impact, but what we're doing as political philosophers, to think about the norms for these strong legal frameworks that we need, to think about these norms as ethics, as morality, but also thinking about what empirical states of affairs in the world we are assuming. What are the circumstances of justice that actually exist today? So coming back to David Hume, who I mentioned at the beginning, he's famous for creating this phrase, circumstances of justice. Now there's a philosophical interpretation of what these mean, and then there's an empirical reality that interpretation then is corresponding with. And I think one of the jobs we need to do is actually think hard about the analysis, the explanation, the empirical context of the circumstances of justice today. And that, yeah, I'll finish with that.
you.